Zak Brown makes shock decision that changes everything about McLaren. In 2025 season, let's be real, no matter how much Zak Brown insists otherwise, Monza cracks something wide open inside McLaren. You don't just call for a driver swap mid-race with championship tension peaking and expect everything to go down smooth. The move to let Norris pass Piastri after Lando's botched pit stop wasn't just strategy, it was a statement. Not everyone's reading it the same way. From the outside, it looked like a panic call. McLaren had both drivers running strong, holding P2 and P3, and the last thing they needed was chaos. But chaos arrived anyway, courtesy of a slow stop for Lando. Suddenly, Oscar found himself ahead, fair and square. But instead of letting things play out naturally, the team stepped in. Swap them. No argument. Let the one who was supposed to be ahead before the stop get back in position. Except that's not how F1 usually works. Zak Brown tried to justify it by preaching about team values, consistency, and fairness, that McLaren isn't about individuals, it's about the collective. Sounds noble, but in F1, nobility doesn't always win races. And when you're in a tight title race, swapping positions because of a slow pit stop feels more like protecting egos than racing for glory, especially when that swap means your arguably faster driver at that moment has to play second fiddle. And that's where the cracks really start to show. Oscar Piastri isn't some rookie thankful just to be on the grid anymore. The kid's fighting for podiums, for wins, for respect. He's not here to make up the numbers or move aside because of someone else's mistake. And you better believe Mark Webber, his manager, isn't going to let this slide quietly either. Let's rewind to what Brown said. This is about the team. That line might sound familiar if you've followed F1 long enough. Teams love pulling that one out when things get awkward. It's the same vibe Red Bull gave when Verstappen refused to give a place back to Perez in Brazil, or when Toto Wolff had to balance the nuclear rivalry between Rosberg and Hamilton. But the difference? Those teams usually let the drivers fight. McLaren didn't. They took the wheel, literally and figuratively, and told Piastri to move. Now sure, Zak claims it wasn't a hard team order, as they wanted to return to the pre-pit stop running order and then let the drivers race it out. But here's the thing, in that kind of high-pressure environment, swapping places under instruction is never just about pace. It sends a message, and the message was clear. Lando is our guy. And that's where this whole situation starts to sting a little deeper. Lando Norris is McLaren's golden child, the face of the franchise, the driver they built around through the rough years. But now he's not alone. Piastri has shown he's more than capable, and when both are in the fight, McLaren finds itself stuck between sentiment and strategy. What makes Monza such a turning point isn't just what happened, it's what it revealed. It showed that McLaren, for all their talk of fairness and principles, might be leaning towards protecting one driver's campaign over the other. And if they're not careful, they could end up repeating the same story we've seen tear other teams apart, because if you're asking your second-year driver to step aside when he's earned his position on track, you better have a plan, otherwise you're not managing a team, you're managing tension. And McLaren just lit the fuse. Oscar Piastri didn't sign up to play second. That much is becoming obvious. The Australian's rise has been rapid, but not by accident. Every lap, every overtake, every podium push, it's been pure proof that he belongs at the top. So when Monza came around and he found himself ahead of Norris fair and square, that was his moment, and McLaren took it from him. They can dress it up however they want, team strategy, pit stop compensation, threat from behind. But the truth sits awkwardly beneath all that PR polish. McLaren chose who to back, and when a team does that while pretending not to, it only adds fuel to the fire. Inside the paddock, everyone felt it. This wasn't just about Monza, this was about what comes next, because if McLaren sets a precedent that position swaps can be made when mistakes happen in the pits, where does it stop? What if it's P1 and P2 next time? What if the point swing is too big to ignore? What if Piastri starts to outqualify and outpace Norris consistently? Do they still swap? Even Toto Wolff weighed in. The man who navigated the minefield of Hamilton versus Rosberg knows a thing or two about team dynamics. His take? There is no right and wrong. But once you make a call like that, you set a precedent. He's not wrong. F1 is a sport of memory. Drivers remember, managers remember, the media never forgets. And now McLaren has a blueprint they'll be expected to follow even when it gets uncomfortable. But here's the kicker. What if this wasn't even necessary? Lando agreed to the undercut strategy. He knew the risks. He could have waited a lap, hoped for a safety car, maybe even lucked into a better stop, but instead, McLaren pulled the trigger early and got it wrong. And yet Oscar paid the price. Some will argue that Lando was faster in the closing laps and would have passed Oscar anyway. Maybe. But taking that moment away, removing the fight, the narrative, the natural battle, kills the spectacle. It flattens the story into a spreadsheet of strategy decisions rather than letting drivers be gladiators. There's also the looming question of morale. Internally, this kind of thing can fracture a team faster than a crash at turn 1. Piastri's camp won't forget, and while McLaren may feel like they're avoiding tension by keeping Norris ahead, they might actually be sowing it deeper. Because no matter how united the garage appears, when one side starts to feel like the backup option, things get personal real quick. It also doesn't help that Lando's season has already seen setbacks. That Zandvoort disaster cost him huge momentum, and now he's playing catch-up in a title chase that's slipping further from his grip. McLaren knows this. They know every point matters, which is exactly why their decision at Monza feels less like principle and more like pressure. And then there's the shadow of Max Verstappen. Red Bull's dominance is no longer a sure thing. Ferrari's creeping in, the title race is wide open. In that kind of chaos, small decisions become massive. Swapping positions might seem minor now, but come Abu Dhabi, it could be the difference between first and second, between a champion and a runner-up, between loyalty and regret. If McLaren wants to survive this fight without tearing itself apart, it needs more than just strategy. It needs honesty, clarity, real rules that don't shift based on who's behind the wheel. Because if they keep playing both sides, they might just lose them both. Lando Norris is running out of time. The potential has always been there, raw talent, smooth racecraft, charisma off track. But the clock in Formula One doesn't wait for anyone. He's no longer the young prodigy. He's now the guy everyone expects to deliver, and that expectation is a weight heavier than any downforce. Each missed opportunity hits harder, each strategic error cuts deeper. And Monza, despite McLaren's best spin, felt like a moment of desperation. A protection move, not for the team, but for Lando. Zak Brown may say otherwise, but even fans watching from their couches could feel it. The McLaren garage is starting to stretch thin under the pressure. There's something uniquely brutal about having two top-tier drivers fighting under the same roof. You're not just racing the other teams, you're racing your own teammate. And when both want to be the face of the future, someone's got to blink. That's where it gets dangerous, because right now, neither Norris nor Piastri is blinking. Oscar may still be new to this level, but his confidence is unmistakable. Quiet, sharp, and surgical in his driving. He doesn't need to shout to make his presence known. His results are doing the talking. And while Lando has the history with the team, Oscar has the momentum. The irony? This rivalry might be what makes McLaren great again, or what tears them down just as fast. Behind the scenes, Andrea Stella has one of the hardest jobs in the paddock. Managing talent is easy when one driver's clearly ahead, but when they're this close in pace, this hungry, and this unwilling to give ground, it turns into chess at 300 kilometers an hour. Every pit strategy, every radio call, every qualifying run, loaded with meaning. One wrong move and you don't just lose a race, you lose trust. The real trouble for McLaren isn't that they chose to swap drivers, it's that they've now exposed themselves to every possible outcome. If they don't swap next time, they'll be called inconsistent. If they do, they risk favoring one driver too obviously. If they let them fight, they risk collisions. There is no clean exit from the precedent they've set. And as Total Wolf pointed out, you can't walk that back. In the short term, the tension might hold, but long term, someone will crack. It could be Piastri, frustrated at being boxed into a number 2 role despite proving he belongs in the top spot. It could be Norris, struggling under the weight of being the chosen one but unable to convert that into a title, or it could be McLaren itself, trying to play the middle while both ends pull harder in opposite directions. The 2025 season still has time to unfold. A lot can change. A DNF here, a surprise win there, even a mid-season contract whisper. But make no mistake, this title fight isn't just with Red Bull or Ferrari. McLaren's biggest threat is internal. They're in a battle of belief systems now, between fairness and favoritism, between long-term vision and short-term survival, between what's right for the brand and what's necessary to win. The dream would be to let them fight. Let Norris and Piastri go wheel to wheel without interference, show the world they're both capable of greatness, and let the best man win. But dreams in Formula One are expensive, and McLaren, caught in a moment they thought they could manage, may have just gambled more than they realized. Because if they get this wrong again, they won't just lose a race, they'll lose the future.